Most lo-fi tracks don't get skipped because they're bad, they get skipped because they create friction. In this episode we're talking about how to keep listeners engaged, not by adding more, but by understanding how people actually listen to lo-fi music.
You're listening to the Lofi Music Academy podcast, your go-to space for all things lo-fi. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of lo-fi music production.
Hi, and welcome to the Lofi Music Academy podcast. I'm Spencer J, your guide through the chilled out, atmospheric world of lo-fi beats. So let me ask you something. Have you ever finished a lo-fi track that you absolutely liked or even loved, but when you check the stats, people just weren't sticking around? No big spike, no obvious drop, just quiet skipping. And that's frustrating because lo-fi isn't supposed to grab people by the collar. It's meant to sit with them. So today's episode is about something most producers never think about directly. And that's why some lo-fi tracks naturally keep listeners listening, and others quietly get skipped. Not through tricks and not through clickbait intros, but through subtle human decisions that respect how people actually listen to your lo-fi music. People often describe lo-fi as background music, and it kind of is, but that's not quite right. Background music fades away, but lo-fi stays present without demanding attention. That's a huge distinction. When someone presses play on a lo-fi track or a playlist, they're not looking to be impressed. They're looking for something that fits their mood, their task, or their moment. Your job as a producer isn't to constantly entertain. It's not to interrupt the listener's emotional flow that they're in. A lot of skips happen, not because a track is bad, but because it asks for attention at the wrong moment. Let's talk about the opening of a lo-fi track, not in a hook sense, but in a trust sense. The first 10 to 15 seconds silently answer a question for the listener. Is this going to feel safe to stay with? If the intro is too abrupt, too busy, too bright, or too unpredictable, the listener's brain flags it as friction. And that doesn't mean intros need to be boring. It means they need to be familiar before they're interesting. Often the best lo-fi intros feel like you've walked into a room where the music's already playing, not like it just started for you. And that sense of continuity is incredibly powerful, especially for retention. Here's a hard truth that sneaks up on a lot of producers, especially as they begin to improve. As your skills grow, your tracks often become less listenable. Not because they're worse, but because they're doing too much. Listeners don't skip lo-fi because nothing happens. They skip because something happened that broke the mood that they was in. A sudden chord change, or an overly clever feel, a texture that all of a sudden jumps out of the mix. In lo-fi, subtlety isn't laziness, it's empathy. You're not composing a story with lots of plot twists. You're creating a space people want to remain inside of. Now, repetition is often misunderstood. Producers worry about being boring. Listeners worry about being unsettled. In lo-fi, repetition is a feature and not a flaw. It allows the listener's nervous system to relax. It reduces cognitive load, and it creates predictability, which is exactly why lo-fi works for studying, working, or winding down. The key isn't avoiding repetition, it's making repetition feel intentional. Small changes matter more than big ones. A hi-hat that shifts slightly, a filter opening just a touch, or a texture fading in and out. Just enough movement to stay alive, but not enough to demand full attention. Here's something fascinating. Two lo-fi tracks can be exactly the same length, but one feels longer. Usually the one that feels longer has too many sections, too many transitions, or too many resets. Great lo-fi arrangements often feel circular rather than linear. It loops naturally, emotionally, not just structurally. When listeners can't tell where they are in the track, they just stop checking. And when people stop checking, they keep listening. That's retention. Not because they're hooked, but because they're comfortable. Subtle variation helps maintain that comfort. Tiny changes in texture, filtering, or background elements can keep the loop feeling alive without breaking the sense of flow. A mix can quietly push listeners away. Harsh highs cause fatigue, unstable low end causes discomfort, and overly forward elements, well, they pull attention out of the task that the listener's trying to do. This is why lo-fi that works at low volume often performs better over time. If a track only sounds good loud, it's demanding. If it sounds balanced quietly, then it supports. Think less about punch and more about ease. The question isn't, does this sound impressive? It's, can someone listen to this for a 30-minute period? Producers sometimes forget that many listeners are using laptop speakers or phones, and a mix that translates gently across those environments tends to hold attention for a lot longer. Streaming platforms reward replay behaviour, but listeners reward recognition. When a listener hears a sound that they recognise, a texture, a tone, a rhythmic feel, they relax. And this is why developing a consistent sonic identity helps with retention. Not branding in a marketing sense, but emotional consistency. When your tracks feel like they belong to the same world, listeners start to trust you more. They know what they're getting. And when people know what they're getting, they tend to stay. Even a small signature elements like a particular chord colour, drum swing or a tape texture, that can quietly signal that a track belongs to you. And over time, that familiarity becomes part of the listener's routine. One of the hardest skills in lo-fi production is restraint, knowing when not to add, when not to automate, and when not to introduce something new. Attention is a limited resource, so every time you pull it towards the music, you're actually pulling it away from whatever the listener's doing. Great lo-fi earns its place by staying out of the way, while still being emotionally present. And that balance is really subtle, and it takes a lot of practice. Often the most effective productions are the ones where the listener notices the feeling of the track and not the individual elements inside of it. And simplicity makes that emotional signal much clearer. So let's reframe the idea of hooking the listener in. It's not about grabbing them, it's about not giving them a reason to leave. Retention in lo-fi is built through emotional safety, sonic consistency, gentle movement, and a respect for the actual listener's headspace. When you design music that serves rather than demands, people stay longer than you expect. In many ways, the best compliment a lo-fi track can receive is invisibility, the moment where the listener forgets the music's even there, yet it still keeps playing. If there's one idea to take away from this episode, it's this: lo-fi isn't about impressing listeners, it's about keeping them company. When you start thinking like a listener instead of a producer, your music changes, your arrangements calm down, your mixes soften, and your decisions become more intentional, and quietly, without force, people listen longer. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with fellow music producers who might find it useful. Until next time, keep creating, stay inspired, and remember, it's all about the vibe. Take care and see you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lo-Fi Music Academy podcast. If you're ready to start making lo-fi music and want to go even deeper, grab your free guide. Discover the 6 essential steps to create a release-ready lo-fi track from scratch. Whether you're using budget gear in your bedroom or a small home studio, this guide will help you get that polished, dreamy lo-fi sound you're after. Just go to www.lofimusicacademy.com. Until next time, keep creating those laid-back vibes, and don't forget to subscribe for more lo-fi tips and tricks.